All right, welcome back. Happy New Year. Good to see you. Isn't it amazing how the first week back is kind of long? It's okay to say that. So we put you back together today. Remember last week, there's more places up here. I know nobody wants to sit. It's like now that the camera's on, nobody wants to sit in this. It does. It really just is on me. So it did work really well last time when we separated out elementary and secondary, and we have a activity we want to do for about 30 minutes because we need some stakeholder input. So you're one of the groups. So we kept you together today because we thought it was a better facilitation, and it's better to mix elementary and secondary as we're getting some input on some district-wide planning. So with that, I'm going to start with the first consideration process. And John's going to start us, then Brett is here. And often with the first consideration process, lots of questions come up. If we can't get to them all, Brett will stay, and you're welcome to ask him. And the questions will be great as we begin communicating. So, yeah, and this is only for that. So if I'm not speaking loud enough, we got to speak loud because it's not the microphone. The microphone's for the camera.
Yeah, got it. Thank you. It's nice to see everybody. I don't know if I've had a chance to actually visit with all of you this year, so that those of you who don't know me, who've been in past groups in past years, I'm John Bate, and I'm the Executive Director of Human Resources for the district. I'm often hanging out over here in the back when you guys are meeting. And now's a chance for Brett and I to get to share some HR information, so we're excited to do that. As Christy mentioned, if we have questions, we'll be able to answer that later, but I'm confident that the information you're going to receive is so good, there probably won't be very many questions, but please ask them if you have them. Brett is our Director of Staffing and HR Initiatives, and he is the primary person that helps shepherd the first consideration process every year. And we want to start by letting you know that the process is largely unchanged. So any of you who are familiar with that in past years, this won't be anything new, but it's always good to hear the specifics and the timelines and some of the clarifying pieces that may be important for you. So I hope you had a chance to pick up the two handouts that were here on the table when you came in, because Brett's going to be referencing those. So if you need those, please come up and grab one. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brett.
Hi, everyone. Aw. Thank you. I am here to talk about, we call it first consideration. I'm actually here to talk about transfers today. And I want to start with a little bit of a language change, actually. There are two things that we deal with when we talk about licensed staff who'd like to move to another location. One of them is first consideration, and that's the name that we tend to apply to everything. But that's actually a contractual benefit that licensed staff receive all year long. That's the benefit that says that when you apply for a vacancy that exists with any of our locations, that up to 6 licensed staff, please, up to 6 licensed staff will receive consideration before we actually look at and offer a position to an external candidate. That's something that goes on throughout the entire year. What we're here to talk about today is something that's related but different, and that's the voluntary transfer process, where about this time every year, we reach out to licensed staff and ask, are you interested in moving to another location? And we do that for 2 reasons. The first is so at a district level, we can gauge what the interest is in moving around to different locations in the different schools and sites that we have before we know what our vacancies are, so we can start to get a feel for that. And number 2, so that we can actually offer you an additional benefit on top of the first consideration that you already receive. That extra benefit is there's a protected window of time that we've started offering in the spring in which our schools and sites may only consider internal applicants, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. So they're related things, but they're slightly different. One is something that happens now, and that's the voluntary transfer process. The other is something that happens all throughout the year, and that's first consideration. Are you with me on that so far? Okay, so the most important handout that I wanted to talk about today is the timeline, hopefully that everyone was able to pick up. Just like in prior years, what we would like to do is we'd like to begin by offering an opportunity for all licensed staff throughout the district to let us know if they're interested in moving to another location. The way that we're going to do that is we will put up pool postings for all of the grades and subjects that we teach throughout the whole district in February. On February 1st, we will put up pool postings for Social studies at the high school level. We'll put up pool postings for 3rd grade at the elementary level, and we will ask if there are any licensed staff that are interested in that assignment and you'd like to move to another location, please let us know. When an applicant goes on to say, yeah, that's something I'd like to do, I'm already a teacher and I would like to move to another location and teach that, they'll have an opportunity to fill out a very short application that asks for a little bit of information about what it is that they're doing now and what their experiences look like. And then more importantly, ask, where would you like to go? And on the form, there'll be an opportunity to submit information about specific schools that they might be interested in, regions of the city. We know that historically, folks have very strong feelings about what side of the bridge you might be on, maybe, just a little bit. And then some questions as well about other types of clusterings of schools as well. Candidates can submit up to 3 different selections on that application, and they're welcome to change those at any time. And it can be any combination of specific sites or regions or types of schools as well. So that'll open on February 1st this year. Important piece, if you're sharing that back with schools, that's just a hair later than we've had it open in previous years, but it's still generally the same process that we've had for the last couple of years. Those postings will stay open throughout the month of February. Okay? That gives us a nice long runway of an entire month to be able to say, yeah, that's something that I've had on my mind right now. The end of February, we will close those postings so that schools can begin to take a look at all the applications that have been received. Okay? We anticipate that in early March, schools will start to have strong information about what vacancies they might have for the upcoming year. And so we're saying that sometime in early or mid-March, schools will be able to start looking over those applications and making selections just from amongst the internal candidates that have submitted an application. So we're not looking at external folks at that time. We're only looking at internal folks who said, gosh, I'd like to be able to move. Okay? Our hope is that we'll be able to run that all the way through the start of spring break. Spring break is traditionally a time when a lot of folks from some of our college programs are starting to shop around to see where they'd like to head for the upcoming year. And so at the start of spring break on the 25th, we would then put up site-specific postings where we know we have vacancies that we haven't already filled with an internal transfer. And from that point forward, we would treat our positions as we normally do. That does not mean that an internal candidate who maybe didn't know in February that they wanted to move doesn't have an option at that point. They sure do still. Just like now, they would still be able to submit an application to that site-specific posting, and they would still receive their first consideration benefit. They just would have missed out on kind of that extra sneak preview window that happens in February and the start of March. That is a quick capsule summary of the sheet that we have. It's not a big departure from what we've done for the last couple of years. It's just timing-wise a little bit different. What questions do you have about that? Please.
I just want to verify if somebody were to put into that pool
Yeah.
and things are reviewed, does that person ultimately have a decision, or do they, like, so are they still kind of being able to apply for a job, or would, if I said, oh, I think I want to go to South Salem and teach 2nd grade, but I haven't met anybody there, would I automatically be moved there if I fit that bill, or would I have the opportunity to decide?
Fantastic.
Repeat the question.
Absolutely. So we're going to paraphrase for our friends online right now. The question was essentially, if I turn in an application during that pool posting window, do I still play a role in deciding whether or not I want to go? Or after I turn in an application, is it just kind of a done deal that's out of my hands at that point? Is that a fair paraphrase?
Yeah.
Okay. I know it's probably a bit more casual than you would have liked, but
So if I say South region,
yeah,
can I just get put at any South school without?
fair. And I guess the companion question then is, if I specified a region, do I just get put at any of those schools, or do I have some choice of which of those schools that I might be interested in? The answer is you have choice. When you submit an application saying that you're interested in transferring, whether it be a part of the pool process or whether it be later in the year to a site-specific posting, after your application has been considered and a principal has looked at all of their candidates for the position, they would submit a request for us to offer that position to you. And if at that time you said, gosh, I've thought about it more and my heart just is really with this other school or where I'm at right now, that's still within your discretion. Now, the piece that I want to share just to put on top of this, because we know every year sometimes we have to make a few staffing adjustments based on enrollment at a particular school, That's something that we call the administrative transfer process. I want to clarify that that's separate from this. That's not this same thing. If a school was going to have a lot less students for an upcoming year, we'd have to have that as a separate conversation related to it. Now, gosh, what we'd sure like is hopefully there's someone who really had their heart set on looking at another school anyway, so that we don't have to disrupt our staff. But that's kind of a separate thing. Great. I saw a hand over here, and then we'll come back.
So there's no like interview with the admin? They just select from the candidates?
Great question. So the question is there any sort of interview process for this voluntary transfer with the administrator? And the answer is yes, there is an interview. The ways in which that's accomplished kind of vary depending on the way that the school would like to address it. In the last couple of years, what we've done is we've collected an initial video interview, and then oftentimes after the principal has reviewed their video interviews, they often select one or more finalists that they invite in for another in-person follow-up as well. If you submit a video interview, and if that is considered for any of the positions, you will absolutely be notified as well, so that you know that that extra step has occurred for any of those positions also. I saw a hand over here.
So teachers in temporary positions can apply during the February window.
Great. The question is, can teachers in a temporary position apply during the February window? And the answer is yes. If a temporary teacher is still actively under contract and serving their assignment, they are equally invited to participate in this process. I just want to throw out there, sometimes we encounter this. What if I'm a temporary teacher and at the time I apply, I'm working under contract, but at the time decisions are made, it's outside of that? If your contract concludes as a temporary teacher, at that point, you cease to be an internal candidate, and we would need to ask you to apply as an external candidate. So, please.
Question about the video interview. So if I applied like for multiple grade levels or different subjects like secondary, do I still have to do multiple video interviews?
Great question. So the question was, if I apply for multiple positions or grade levels, do I have to conduct multiple video interviews for each of those applications that I've turned in? That will vary depending on whether or not that level or that subject area has identified specific questions for the interview. You would not need to repeat the exact same interview multiple times. But if, for instance, I have applied for a high school English position, but I also have experience teaching at elementary, and gosh, I've been considering an elementary assignment, those two assignments might have different sets of questions for their interview, and then you would want to do an interview for each, and you would receive a separate invitation for those two.
Last year when that happened, you got the same interview. I did 2 interviews and they were exactly the same. So that's why I just wanted to clarify.
Great clarification. Yeah, so the question for clarifying was, last year there were some folks that received multiple repeat interview invites for the same set of questions. Is that going to happen again? No, our goal is for that not to happen. We've adopted some new tools in the last year, and perhaps more importantly, we've gotten a little bit better at using them. So our goal is for you not to have to repeat the same interview. If there's a meaningful difference in the interview, by all means, we want to get that information. We don't want you to have to repeat your same answer multiple times. Yeah. And I apologize, I've lost track. We'll go here and then we'll go to the back. Please.
So a question that came up in the past that I heard somebody asking is, what percentage of staff members actually that put in for first consideration get placed through that? Like, do you know what percentage of people actually find a new job because of first consideration?
Sure. So part of that's going to depend on what we're actually measuring. The question was, what percentage of staff who participate in first consideration actually receive the position that they're asking for? I'm gonna split hairs a little bit, and my boss is in the room and knows that I like to be pedantic with language too, so I apologize. It depends on whether or not we're talking about first consideration, which is the benefit that licensed staff receive when they apply for positions all year long, or if we're talking about that initial window that happens in January, which first consideration is part of, but it's just a small sample. It varies from year to year. In that first window, in the last couple of years, I want to say, and I'm working off the top of my head, that I think we've seen about 30 to 40% in the first window that have received those transfers. Oftentimes, that is because we have strong interest in 1 or 2 schools for a small number of positions. And so there is fairness to say that we can only place so many people based upon the supply of positions that we have. As you extend that out across requests for transfer throughout the full year, that percentage creeps up. So just like we talked about previously, even after February comes past, you can still apply for site-specific positions, and then we tend to be able to accommodate more moves throughout the rest of the summer or the rest of the year as well. So I had a hand back here.
If the teachers have time at 2 schools
Sure.
and they want to apply for just one of the
schools to transfer. Is that possible to do, or?
That's a great question. So the question was, if a teacher is half-time and they're split between, excuse me, let me go back. The teacher is full-time, but they're split half-time across 2 different schools, and they only want to apply for a transfer of a half of their assignment. Is that possible for them to do? The short answer is yes. The individual mechanics would vary depending on what those schools are and their schedules look like and how we would be able to make that work. I mean, there are some logistical things that we would need to look through, but by all means, we would say, please submit an application and let's see if it's something that we could take a look at. So, other questions, please.
As far as special education, those
Yeah.
things like LRC teachers or speech language pathologists, I know in the past that's come later, but
Sure.
a lot of us still are questioning why we go through first consideration, because a lot of our placement is based on numbers and loads. So
Sure.
that's always been confusing to us as to why we're going through that when they might adjust it afterwards anyway.
Sure. So I'm gonna paraphrase a little bit. There was a statement and a question that was kind of in here, and part of it was the fact that for special educators, assignments are based largely upon caseload and need in particular schools, and then also based upon which sites have particular programs as well. There is a parallel first consideration process and voluntary transfer process that has existed, but there was some question as to what does that look like and why do we go through that process. I'm going to opine for a moment. Just like with a general ed position, we want folks to be where they want to be, if that makes sense. Obviously, we're all happiest when we're doing the work that we want to do and we're doing it where we want to be doing it, right? There will be logistical limitations based upon where a program is at and based upon the caseloads that are there for how many spaces, perhaps, that we have available in a certain school. We do want special educators to let us know if there's a location they'd like to move to. There would still need to be an analysis to determine, is there enough of a caseload to warrant however many educators might be assigned to that location. In past years, I can tell you that process has been run somewhat separately from the voluntarily transfer process for a general license staff. Our goal this year is to make it as similar and occurring at the same time as possible, and we're still working through what that'll look like specifically. So, other questions? Okay.
You leave here and have questions. Brett Cheever
Hi.
is the one to email questions, right?
Yeah, please, or call. I have to apologize. Sometimes I get stuck in meetings, but I promise I will get back with you. We will be sending out communications. The other handout that you might have grabbed when you came in was a draft of an email. That email is intended to go out on February 1st, 2019 to all licensed staff to let them know about the process we just talked about today. It gets a little nuts and boltsy on how you would go about submitting an application for some of those positions. Hopefully that draft is pretty accurate for what we'll be sending out. I promise you I will read it about 18 more times before we get to that date though, and if we see anything that's awry, we'll get it corrected. If you have feedback, if you read it and go, this is great, but there's this question that I always get every year or I've heard about, let us know. We'd be happy to incorporate that too. The whole end of the email is kind of a frequently asked questions, and we'd be happy to capture anything that's a common need. Thanks for letting me hang out. Thanks.
All right, Karma, we're going to talk about boundaries again. We're getting closer to the end of the process, so you're going to have to speak really loud. Okay, the
Really loud?
microphone is only working for that. So you gotta
Okay,
do really
boundaries, and then a little bond update after that too? Right, okay. So quickly on boundaries, I think last time we talked, we mentioned that the Boundary Review Task Force was in progress. They were working hard to develop their recommendation. They have since finished their work. Their last meeting was December 11th. They've created their proposal for adjusted boundaries, and now staff is really working to compile all of that into a report which will go before the board for their first reading January 15th. Okay, there are some maps online now that you can take a look at that give you sort of a preview of that, but the final preparation of the recommendation is still going on. So at that point, the board will again hear the second reading in February, and they're scheduled to vote in February. So staff is also working hard on studying how transition would happen and developing a communication plan so that if the board should vote to approve the proposal in February, we're able to hit the ground running with information for families. I believe we've also got some dates posted on Yammer of these upcoming dates, so the 15th, February 12th, if you want to take a look at that so you can see what's coming up in the future. So that's the quick, I need to be louder. So that's the real quick on boundaries. What boundary questions do you have before we go to bond? Yes, question here.
Well, actually, someone else asked me to ask this. And with that, is there going to be like a timeline for parents and staff? Like, when are they going to announce it to parents, deadlines for IDTs?
Sure. Yeah. So the question is, how do we tell folks what the process is? What are deadlines for IDTs or claiming continuity exemptions, those kind of things once there's a decision? So our goal is that once there is a decision on boundaries, we're able to communicate immediately with families. Everyone that would be affected by a boundary adjustment would receive a letter. The letter would very clearly spell out what the change in assignment is, details about the continuity exemption, all the deadlines to apply, how you do that. We'd also want to make sure that school offices are well informed so they have all of the same information, because they're going to be getting questions directly on, gosh, I lost my letter, or, am I affected or not? So they'll have the same information that was mailed out. Okay. Others? Yes.
It would be great if there was a way somehow in the communication pipeline to also give teachers, classroom teachers, the right verbiage of who to contact about what, because a lot of times parents will bypass the office, or a drop off or pickup might come into a panic, and so equipping teachers with the
Sure.
verbiage you'd like us
Right.
to use.
Okay.
To help,
Yeah, to help your parents.
tension stuff that's going to arise.
Yeah.
Already happening.
Okay. Yeah. So the request was, what can we prepare for teachers so that when parents have the same types of questions of, am I affected or not, or what happens next, how to direct them. So yeah, let me put some of that together, and the best way to get it to you, we'll figure that out. Could be on Yammer.
We'll probably put it out in like a special edition of the internal newsletter.
Okay.
Boundaries or something like that, because really all staff should have that.
Yeah. Great.
And have a teacher.
Should I repeat what you said for the listeners online? Well, a special edition staff newsletter could contain that information so that everybody has it. Great request, great question. Thank you. And back there? Okay, so the question is about program placements and special education moves. And so the boundary process was really about adjusting enrollments. It did not address changing program placements. That's staff work that would come sometime later. So the first communication will be about, where your assigned school is. If you're currently receiving services, there will still be services for you. If you're currently attending a school on an approved IDT somewhere that's not your current school, that doesn't change. Is there anything more to say on that? Christy's got a little more.
Yeah, I think I also want to say, if we were moving a program, we would communicate directly with those parents as well. It would be separate from this communication. And so right now, there isn't a set number of programs that are moving. Over time, they should be, but right now, not. But if we are going to move a program, like we do every year, have to move a program or two, we will communicate directly with the, of course, affected teacher, but also the parents in the classroom.
Okay, another boundary question or two. No. Okay, your quick bond update. We are just about to tell our friends in the community about some news that is a safety measure that we're taking as we prepare for bond construction. So our friends at Facility Services are working really hard, making plans and laying groundwork so that they can start to implement construction quickly at the end of the school year. One of those plans is that when a school is receiving major construction, and so for 2019 we have 5 of those schools, consider please, in general, that those campuses will be closed to use for 2 summers. Okay, so our 2019 schools that are starting construction are North Salem High School, McNary High School, Gubser Elementary, Judson Middle School, Waldo Middle School. Okay, and so this is for safety. These are going to be construction zones. A lot of them will be hard hat areas. even portions of the building that may not be under construction might not be able to get to them because the way to get to them is under construction. Parking won't be available. So we are letting internally everyone know, and we hope maybe tomorrow, maybe Monday, a press release will go out letting our community know that this is going to impact their use of our facilities during the summer. We've made some contacts already with some of our major partners, so they had a personal call about it. But it would be helpful if you hear questions about this, that you're able to say to people, yes, this is an active construction zone. School use isn't allowed. However, our facilities rental department will be keeping track of where there are available spaces in the district and can help place folks who are looking for a spot. Okay, yes, question here. Correct. Good question. Yeah, so the question is what happens with summer programs? Yes, currently there's planning on where those programs can go because they can't be, at McNary or North this summer, working on, placing those at another school. So there is a bit of a ripple effect as far as availability of space. So if it normally is here, it's displaced to another school. That affects their use. So it's very, very important that our facility rentals folks are in the loop and able to have a handle on the inventory of available spaces and unavailable spaces in the district. So yeah, please funnel everything to them that you might know about would want to use space. Got more questions on that back there? Sure. The 5 schools that are under construction this summer, starting 2019, are Gubser Elementary in Keizer, Waldo Middle School, Judson Middle School, McNary High School, and North Salem High School. Okay, sure. Other questions?
For summer school programs that are moved, is there going to be any transportation available for students now that it might be out of their neighborhood?
Great question. The question is about summer school programs that might be moved out of their neighborhood and transportation. And I'm sorry, I don't know about that. Are we?
So as a summer program coordinator, we're working on all of those logistics.
Jim said we're working on the logistics. Yeah. Okay. To be determined. Any other summer construction closure type of questions? Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, I'm going to do the school calendar because it's quick, and then we'll move into our feedback exercise. So lots of questions about the school calendar. Before break, we had some great advice from one of our teachers on the calendar committee that said, hey, can you at least get out the start dates, vacation days, all of that. So we got those out before break. I think hopefully you saw those. And then the calendar committee is meeting next week to see if they can get to final on the school calendar. So coming soon to a neighborhood near you, it will be the school calendar. And I promise you then they're going to go right into working on the calendar for the following year. So we'll get, we're going to get this going. In the old days, we used to do 2 years in a row. And so we're going to get back to this. So hopefully beginning of February at the very latest, we'll have school calendar out. Okay, so let me tell you about what we're going to do, and we have some helpers with us today. We have to, you can keep it on and then turn it off when we start. We have a district-wide planning process that we're going through in part because as a state, we have some requirements around strategic planning, and in second part because it's always good to get stakeholder input around some key areas in your district in a continuous improvement cycle. So all of our title schools ultimately will have to go through this sort of a process called ORIS. It's a continuous improvement process. They are required to do it as part of their Title I planning for federal funding and through the Oregon Department of Ed. So we're doing that ORIS process as a district first to lead with that. So our hope is 2 things. 1, it will give us very good information about our own strategic planning, and 2, that it will be helpful for our schools so they don't have to take the full cumbersome burden of that planning process on themselves. So all of our title schools ultimately have to do it. Our schools that are targeted as targeted or comprehensive have to do it this year. So that's in part why we are working to take the lead, because it's good for us as a district, but we're also hoping it will be helpful for schools. So there's 5, and really to do this well, to get a full thing of input, we would take several hours. So that's why we're just going to take a couple little pieces to give us a snapshot of input. We might come back in February to get more as we're gaining themes and narrowing it down. And we're just in the beginning of this. So we have 5 areas: leadership development, talent development, stakeholder engagement and partnerships, well-rounded coordinated learning principles, and inclusive policy and practice. And we have facilitators in the room, and they are going to just spend a little time with the indicator that they've chosen for you to respond on. They have a place for you to do some written feedback and some group feedback. And then we're taking that and putting that in the feedback mix as we go out to stakeholders. So you'll hear about this again, of course, and we'll come back with some of the themes we're hearing as well at an upcoming meeting. So with that, where are my facilitators? Why don't you stand up and find your place? And what's that? Oh, I get to be one of them. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to let you turn that off. And I'm going to be group 1. Karen's going to be 2. Wendy's going to be 3. Shannon's going to be